What would you do if you came face to face with someone who made your life miserable? One man confronted his past at a reunion, and what happened next will leave you speechless. It had been 15 long years since Ethan last walked the halls of Ridgewood High, but the memories still clung to him, vivid and unrelenting. Most people remembered high school as a carefree time of friends and laughter. For Ethan, it was different. Back then, he was the quiet, lanky kid who never quite fit in, the one who slipped through the cracks unnoticed, at least by most. But not by Brandon Scott. Brandon was everything Ethan wasn't. Confident, popular, and charismatic. Teachers adored him, classmates admired him, and he ruled the school's social hierarchy with ease. But for Ethan, Brandon was the source of endless torment. A cruel joke in the cafeteria, a shove in the hallway, mocking laughter that echoed louder than any school bell. Ethan had counted the days until graduation, praying that leaving Ridgewood would mean leaving the pain behind. And for the most part, he had moved on. Life after high school had been kind to Ethan. He had carved out a successful career as a software developer, built a small but loyal circle of friends, and embraced the quiet life he always wanted. But every so often, the memories of Ridgewood would sneak back in. The taunts, the humiliation, the helplessness, and with them, a twinge of anger he thought he'd buried. When the reunion invitation arrived in his mailbox, Ethan's first instinct was to toss it in the trash. What could possibly be gained by revisiting a chapter of his life he'd tried so hard to close? But the invitation sat on his kitchen counter for days, taunting him. A part of him couldn't shake the thought, what if this was my chance? Not a chance to relive old pain, but to reclaim his story. To walk into that room, not as the boy who had been pushed around, but as the man who had risen above it. Maybe he needed to confront those ghosts to finally be free of them. On the night of the reunion, Ethan stood outside the brightly lit banquet hall, his heart pounding against his ribs. The sound of laughter and music spilled out into the parking lot, stirring emotions he thought he'd long forgotten. Memories tugged at him, good ones, bad ones, and everything in between. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel of his car, debating whether to leave. But no, he was here now, and he wasn't going to let fear dictate his life anymore. With a deep breath, Ethan stepped out of the car and into the building, his nerves battling with a quiet determination. What he didn't know was that tonight wouldn't just be about facing old friends or old memories. It would be about facing Brandon and himself in a way he never could have imagined. The banquet hall buzzed with energy, laughter echoing off the walls as groups of former classmates mingled and shared stories. Ethan hesitated near the entrance, scanning the room for familiar faces. Time had changed everyone. Wrinkles around smiling eyes, softer figures, and a quieter energy compared to their high school days. A few friendly nods and polite greetings came his way as he moved further inside. "Ethan, right?" a woman asked with a warm smile. It took a second, but he remembered Claire from chemistry class. They exchanged pleasantries, and for a moment, Ethan felt a bit lighter. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. But then he saw him, Brandon Scott, standing near the bar, effortlessly charming a group of classmates. Tom had barely touched him. The same confident smile, the same commanding presence. Ethan's stomach tightened. He wanted to walk away, pretend he hadn't seen him, but curiosity and something deeper rooted him to the spot. Would Brandon even remember him? Did he ever think about what he had done back then? Or was it just another page in his golden boy story? As the night went on, Ethan tried to avoid Brandon, but fate had other plans. "Ethan," a familiar voice called out behind him. Ethan turned, heart thudding in his chest. Brandon stood there, a drink in hand, looking genuinely surprised. "Wow, it's been a long time." Ethan forced a polite smile. "Yeah, it has." "You look good," Brandon said, his tone casual, as if they were old friends catching up. "Thanks," Ethan replied, keeping his voice steady. For a moment, there was an awkward silence. Memories of every taunt, every shove, and every moment of humiliation flashed through Ethan's mind. He wanted to say something sharp, something that would make Brandon understand the damage he'd done. But then Brandon spoke again. "Listen, I've been meaning to say something for years." Brandon's expression softened. "I was a jerk back in high school. No excuses. I was just an insecure kid who thought being tough made me important. I've regretted it for a long time." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "You remember that?" Brandon nodded. "Of course I do. And I'm sorry, man. I don't know if that means anything now, but I wanted you to know." Ethan's heart raced. Part of him wanted to lash out, to tell Brandon how much pain he had caused. But another part, the part that had spent years trying to heal, saw the sincerity in Brandon's eyes. "I appreciate that," Ethan said slowly, the weight of years lifting just a bit. "It wasn't easy, but I moved on." Brandon extended his hand. "I'm glad. And if there's ever a way I can make things right, let me know." Ethan hesitated for a moment before shaking his hand. "Maybe just being a better person is enough." Brandon chuckled softly. "Fair deal." As Brandon walked away to join another group, Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, closure, and a sense of pride. He had faced his past and walked away stronger. Later that night, Ethan stepped outside the banquet hall to get some air. The cool breeze brushed against his face, a welcome contrast to the warmth and noise inside. He leaned against the railing, staring at the city lights in the distance. He couldn't shake the conversation with Brandon from his mind. The apology had been unexpected, and while part of him had wanted a dramatic confrontation, it hadn't gone that way. Life wasn't always about grand gestures, he realized. Sometimes healing came in quiet moments. As he stood there, lost in thought, the door behind him creaked open. Footsteps approached, and without turning, he knew it was Brandon. "Hey," Brandon said, his voice softer than it had been earlier. "Mind if I join you?" Ethan shrugged. "Sure." They stood in silence for a while, the distant hum of traffic filling the gaps. "You know," Brandon began, "after high school, I went through some rough patches. Lost my way for a bit. Thought I had everything figured out, but life has a funny way of humbling you." Ethan glanced at him. "Yeah? What happened?" Brandon sighed. "I got into some trouble, bad decisions, wrong crowd. Ended up losing a scholarship and nearly flunking out of college. It was a wake-up call. Had to rebuild my life from scratch." He paused. "I guess I realized I wasn't the king of the world after all." Ethan listened, surprised by the vulnerability in Brandon's voice. The man who had once seemed untouchable now stood before him, human and flawed. "Funny how life teaches us lessons when we least expect it," Ethan said quietly. Brandon nodded. "Yeah, I always felt guilty about how I treated you. I guess I was projecting my own insecurities. I know that doesn't erase what I did, but I hope it counts for something." "It does," Ethan admitted, his voice steady. "I won't lie, it hurt back then, but I'm not that kid anymore. And honestly, hearing this from you helps." Brandon exhaled deeply, as if a weight had been lifted. "Thanks for saying that." Ethan looked up at the stars. "You know, I came here tonight thinking I'd avoid you at all costs. But I'm glad I didn't." "Me too," Brandon said sincerely. As they walked back inside, Ethan realized something profound. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about freeing yourself from its grip. And tonight he had done just that. Back inside the banquet hall, the atmosphere was still lively, filled with laughter and music. People danced, toasted, and swapped stories about days gone by. Ethan and Brandon parted ways naturally, each finding their own group of classmates to catch up with. Ethan found himself at a table with Claire and a few others who had been friendly during high school, but never close. Their conversation was warm and filled with genuine curiosity about each other's lives. For the first time, Ethan felt truly comfortable, no longer weighed down by memories of ridicule or judgment. "So, how's life treating you these days?" Claire asked with a kind smile. "Pretty good," Ethan replied honestly. "It took some time, but I built a life I'm proud of." "That's great to hear," she said. "You always seemed like someone who'd go far." Ethan smiled at the unexpected compliment. Thanks. I guess high school doesn't define who we become. As the night wound down, Ethan stood near the exit, looking around one last time. What had started as a reluctant decision to attend the reunion had turned into something meaningful, a chance to confront his past, find closure, and even reconnect with people he had never thought would matter again. Brandon caught his eye from across the room and gave him a small, respectful nod. Ethan returned it, feeling lighter than he had in years. As he stepped out into the cool night air, Ethan's heart was at peace. He had come seeking closure but found something even better, proof that people could change, and so could he. Life was about growth, and tonight had been a powerful reminder of that. With a newfound sense of freedom, Ethan walked toward his car, the weight of old memories finally lifted. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. Holding on to resentment only keeps us tied to the past, but forgiveness, both of others and ourselves, can set us free. People grow, change, and sometimes they even seek redemption. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over pain. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Brotherhood Tales for more inspiring stories. And remember, sometimes the greatest strength lies in forgiveness. See you in the next tale.